Hello, friends. Thanks for your patience. I was just getting that frozen pizza out of the oven for the kids and slicing it up before I came up. So I'm so happy to be here in our new day and new time. I'm really excited to dig into the subject matter. How are you on this fine day, Sierra?
I'm doing good. I haven't had a frozen pizza in quite some time, and they are definitely a special kind of delicious. So I see you're on mom duty as always. That is awesome. I'm having a pretty good day. I'm looking forward to the upcoming weekend. It's a long weekend for me. We have a Columbus Day holiday here, so it's stuff is going to be closed and a little slower. So I'm looking forward to that.
My kids are on fall break. So we're on a modified year round program, my two that are still in school. And so that looks like 2 weeks off in the fall and 2 weeks off in the winter and 2 weeks off in the spring. And then a very short, I guess it's not that short, but it's usually just under 2 months for the summer break. So we in the fall break always loops into Indigenous Peoples Day or Columbus Day, whatever they call it where you are. And so, yeah, they are off on Monday. I have a new gig and I get a bunch of paid holidays, but this Monday is not one of them. But that's all right.
Nice. Wow, that's a nice arrangement that kids have nowadays. Seems like there's lots of intermittent breaks. And when I went to school, we certainly didn't have that. They kind of clustered the breaks around um, Christmas time and then Easter were like our two long breaks, but it would have been so much better to kind of break them out a bit more just to give our brains a rest and do normal kid stuff. So I see we have some regulars here. Hey, Heather. Hey, Exodus. Nice to see you again. Kitty Princess. Welcome back. Women with Curves. It is awesome to have you. So happy Wednesday. This is our new time. We moved our Twitter spaces from 2 o'clock Eastern to 7 p.m. in hopes of better accommodating everyone's schedules. Hopefully, at this point, most of us have kind of wrapped up our school or our work and we're kind of starting to wind down, hopefully. And if not, that's okay too. Today, I'm super excited to kind of get back to basics and talk about mindfulness, which feels appropriately timed. I feel like I really need a hearty discussion about mindfulness right now. What about you, Abby?
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute. I feel like it's always a good time to come back to the basics. There's never a bad time to have a beginner's mind about things. And that's why I love intentional spaces and intentional friends so that we can continue to have these conversations and remind each other and sometimes bring a little different perspective or new way of thinking about it or a reminder of something we've forgotten. And so, yes, it's very well timed for me as well. It's a new season and so many of us I feel like are in transitions in our life in different ways and that definitely applies to me. So I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on mindfulness. How do you define it? What would you consider mindfulness to be?
Man, in the hours leading up to this space, I was really digging into that. I mean, at its core, I feel like mindfulness kind of ties into awareness in general. And it's for me, it has a lot to do with being here now and being conscious of the present moment and trying to kind of do things one thing at a time. As of recently, it's kind of evolved for me into looking a lot like trying not to attach to my reactions and emotions as much and not getting hooked into these spirals and mental patterns that I've kind of started to observe within myself. And really recognizing how judgmental I tend to be toward myself and trying to observe and accept more instead of judging. Trying to, I love that you mentioned beginner's mind because for me, it has a lot to do with embracing imperfection and trying to be more open minded. So what about you, Abby? How would you kind of define mindfulness based on your experiences?
To start, similar how you began, not just awareness to me, but a keen sense of awareness, right? Being fully present. And I like how you said in this moment, and not distracted by the past or the future. And that's such a challenge, right? But to me, mindfulness is a practice, especially initially, when we're first approaching it. And then it becomes a lifestyle. But with that lifestyle is continued practice and continually bringing ourselves back to that awareness. I've said this before, but it's such a great example. Things like brushing your teeth and bathing, these things don't last. So we do them, right, pretty regularly, daily, multiple times a day. Whereas, same with things like motivation and mindfulness, we have to continually keep bringing our awareness back to it. So it is a practice that can become a habit, that can become a lifestyle. And for me, it's certainly changed over the years. I think when our consciousness and awareness begins to expand, we all start somewhere. We all start off small. There's a line in a Fish song. We all start off small, and we work with what we have. But then we begin to notice how mindfulness can really, when we're being mindful, we can imbue this into everything we're doing, where we're really showing up and utilizing all of our senses. And nowadays, these days, I'm really diving into a lot of trauma informed sensitivity training. And it really echoes a lot of what I've done in the wellness industry, is trying to look through the lens when we're being mindful of relationship and mindful of one another. I like how you said less judgment, just across the board with ourselves, but also with others, instead of what is wrong with that mofo over there. It's more like what happened to them, and just trying to be more mindful of the automatic responses in our brains, those impulses that kind of jerk our chain around, and taking a step back, taking a breath, and finding that fullness in the present moment, so we don't start to spiral out of control. I don't know. Those were kind of my thoughts, leading up to this. What does that spark for you, as a catalyst for conversation?
I love that you mentioned it's a practice. I feel like that word and that term is so important to note because it kind of reminds you that it's not a natural inclination and that we really need to train ourselves to be mindful. Um, I've never met, I mean, whatever, I've never met Jesus or Buddha or Mother Teresa. So I guess I've never met someone who's just a naturally like super conscious and mindful person with no earthly baggage. So I don't think I've had that unique privilege and honor. I don't know if any of us have. It's not natural. It's like something we really have to work on and be patient with. And also, too, it's not about fixing anything. Like, I feel like there's almost like there's this thought that, like, okay, well, if I'm not being mindful, then like I'm bad or like I'm doing something wrong. And it's like, no, like your thoughts running wild is not abnormal. That's also pretty normal. Being unconscious is kind of kind of baseline for most of us, which is reality. So, yeah, that's kind of what came to mind for me, Abby.
It's really what our brains and our nervous systems are wired to do, to be not fully conscious. It is a practice that we have to awaken. As you said, most of us are not self actualized, ascended masters, as you were alluding to. The closest I've come, I don't know if you're familiar with Amma. There's a woman named Amma, and her dharma is giving hugs, and she smells of jasmine, and she tours to different centers. And I went to Iowa City to see her several years ago. My 14-year-old had just been born, and I got a hug from Amma, and I also got a mantra, a personal mantra that you don't share with others. It's your personal mantra. And when that woman walked into the room full of people waiting for her, the energy shift in the room was palpable. And we all wait in line to hug this woman. There's a special ceremony that she does where she allows, basically embodies the divine mother goddess herself And it's really an amazing experience. That's the closest I've come to some type of being that feels like they are in that state of flow and mindfulness and awareness, you know, pretty frequently. But as you mentioned, most of us are mere humans, and our brains and our nervous systems are quite literally wired for us to not be fully awake and conscious. We're it's environment, and it's also right nature, and we're brought into these environments where unless you've been in a really special home, folks aren't really teaching about mindfulness from the moment we begin. And so it is a learned skill, it is a learned practice, and it's something like you said, not to like, oh man, I think it's kind of similar to like meditation and yoga, or even crystal healing. People hear it and think, oh, that's going to be a lot of work. I'm not ready for that. I'm not good enough at something to do that thing, or I should be doing that more. And what's wrong with me? And then we avoid even addressing the thing. Um, it, so I think just understanding that we are naturally inclined to be mindless, or rather than mindless, just full of automatic thoughts running wild, like horses in a carriage that have run wild and no one has the reins. Mindfulness practices start to give us the reins back so that we can be in control of the thoughts when they come up. We know that we can pull back the reins and pause and take a breath and, work with those thoughts to move forward. So it really is a practice in observation, of slowing down, of giving yourself grace. And I bet you could do, we've talked about audits in other ways. I bet we can do an audit in our lives to see, you know what, I am mindful in certain ways. I think we're so quick to judge ourselves, as you said, you do of your own self. Audit yourself and see where you are showing up for yourself, and lean into those places, and know that you can start to do little things like mindful eating could be a 10-minute exercise where you're quietly eating and fully being aware of the taste of the food and the smell. All of your senses are engaged. You're not on your phone. You're trying not to be distracted by the thoughts. Thoughts are going to come and go. So the idea is not to like play tug of war with them, but to just take a breath and come back to this moment, right? And you could apply this to anything. We can mindfully wash the dishes. We can mindfully put on our socks and shoes and get dressed in the morning. There are things that we can start to adopt in small ways and incorporate into what we're already doing, so we can retrain that brain and that nervous system to want more order and want more peace and calm. And it's this neat thing that starts to unfold once we start to do it more and more and more. It just takes a lot of practice.
Beautifully said. I love that you mentioned mindfully eating. I feel like I can definitely have a bad tendency of just kind of plowing it down. Next thing I know, it's gone. Didn't even taste it. Just serving a need, getting my calories and energy for the day so I can sustain and continue to doom scroll. No intention, no love. So I love that you mentioned that. Quickly, there are so many things I want to touch on, but before doing so, I just want to kind of reset the room. And now that it's filled up quite a bit more, welcome everyone. We are officially in double digits of mindful business. This is episode 1010. Very proud and excited about that. I see we have a couple more folks here. Welcome, Lori, lovely Lori. Welcome, Tuesday, entrepreneur. We Alaska, who recently became a holder of our NFT collection, Juju Gallery. Appreciate you, dear friend. Welcome, welcome. Today we're talking about mindfulness. We're going to continue the discussion another 15 or 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to open the floor for speaking requests if you would like to join the conversation and contribute. So sit tight. We would love to have you participate. So, Abby, I love that you mentioned like mindful eating, mindfully washing the dishes. It can definitely be infused into every single experience. I feel like a lot of us, when we think of mindfulness, tend to immediately our mind runs to breath work or meditation or yoga. It's kind of like these are the things that pop into our head, and we don't remember that, like, okay, we can infuse mindfulness into even the smallest practices. On Friday, I went to the Social Security office to change my name finally, officially, since getting married a few months ago. And anyone in this space who lives in the United States and has ever been to a government office to get anything done knows how much of a strange experience it is. I don't know how to describe it. It's just always terrible. Like, there's just always odd things going on. Someone's yelling, someone stinks. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's a terrible place. So I really had to bring out my mindfulness on Friday in the Social Security office because I took my ticket and I had to sit there for, nearly an hour to wait to see someone and hope that I had the right papers and hope I don't have to come back another day. And I felt myself getting a little anxious and irritated. And I really had to pull out my mindfulness and be like, okay, I'm going to have a mindful patient experience and I'm going to read the book I have and not get irritated and just wait for my number to be called and everything's going to be okay. And it was. But for others, it's like mindfulness could look like taking a walk in nature or exercising or reciting mantras or making a gratitude list. Like, the sky is really the limit, and mindfulness is not just like sitting and chanting and or stretching. You can adapt it to fit your life. So what are some ways, Abby, that you think we can kind of like try to become more mindful and adapt mindfulness to best serve us as individuals?
I think you touched on some great things. I think our mind thinks of these big practices. I will say doing the big practices can be a helpful tool in infusing those states of being into those daily activities. If we are continually kind of chipping away, I think it's these small efforts over time that really add up. If we are making time for a little breath work every day and stretching a few times a week or whatever, it will make infusing the mindfulness into your daily interactions more successful, more sustainable. And I think really it's the little moments that mean the absolute most. I think things like showing when we are showing up for someone in an IRL meeting, looking a person as best you can. I mean, sometimes there are limitations we might have that make eye contact difficult for us. If eye contact is accessible to you, making sure you are looking warmly in someone's face when you show up for them, not looking at your phone, making a dedicated time to not touch the motherfucking phone. Excuse me, I think it's one of my personal triggers. But you know what I'm saying? Little things like fully showing up in the moment, not just for yourself, but for others, and being aware of how we give and receive information, little things like that. Or if we want to be more practical, talking about doing the dishes mindfully, that could look like being aware of your posture when you are doing the dishes, being aware of your state of mind and mood. Sometimes we're frustrated and we're scrubbing that dish. Could we breathe through and recognize what we're feeling and just be aware of the flow of the water and the temperature of the water, aware of if your hip is cocked to one side, are you busy talking or listening to the radio or watching a television show? Can you tune all those other things out and show up fully for whatever it is the activity is that you've chosen to commit to in that moment? I think as we start to really do that, we improve so many things on a personal level and beyond. And it really can be as simple as that. Don't overcomplicate it, but just practice fully showing up to whatever it is you have chosen to commit your time to. So those are my thoughts. What about you, Sierra?
Fully showing up, not looking at the phone. What a challenge, these simple things. Oh my goodness. I'm worried for the next generation. They're going to come out of the womb with the phone like hardwired to their head. It's going to be like just a part of their brain. Like, we're going to be fused and become one with technology. Is what I think is going to happen. But I totally agree with you. Small efforts compound over time and add up. And it's like that even if it's just a few minutes a day, like for me, I've noticed like I need some quiet time in the morning. Like like I need no one to talk to me and like bother me, and I just need to sit with my thoughts before coffee, before anything. I need some quiet time in the morning, and I need a midday breather because like I don't know, plowing through your workday, especially as I get older and have more professional experience, I'm just like it's like raw dogging life. It's like you're just gonna plow through an 8 hour workday with like a quick 20-minute like break to like shovel down a sandwich. Like, what is this? Like, what type of dystopian world are we living in? This is awful. It's like, no, take a midday breather. Like, if you have a break in the middle of your day for lunch, an hour, 45, 30, fully explore that time. Walk your dog, do a quick sequence stretching, get like a decent meal in. Like, I'm noticing for me, like, these things are critical. Like, that midday break is essential. And yoga has definitely been a game changer for me. It's really one of the only mindfulness practices I've been able to stick to and stay excited about. I never get excited when I sit down for a meditation. It feels like a daunting task. I'm like, oh God, here we go again. Gonna follow my thoughts around for 20 minutes and like feel exhausted by the end of it and go through this loop, you know? So it's like yoga's been a game changer because there's not all of this I don't want to say self doubt, but I guess negative self talk about, am I doing it right? It's like, okay, just do your best to get in the pose. And before you have time to even judge whether you're in the pose the right way, you're moving on to the next one. So, oh well, you did your best. But yeah, showing up in the moment, yeah, it allows us to just have a rich experience and to live a life that is more fulfilling and memorable and valuable. So, I am totally with you, Abby. I think we should talk about some of the benefits of mindfulness. I mean, I think obviously being present, you can experience life in a different way and you can really take things in and savor the moment. But what are some benefits that you've personally experienced from your own mindfulness practice? I know you're going to talk about stress and stress management. So tell me more about that.
You know me so well, my friend. That is my jam, stress management. And I'm on a lifelong mission to help people manage their stress in better and more creative ways. Because here's the deal: we know science tells us that stress is the underlying cause, right? Of not to get to be a real bummer on you here, but we know that it's the underlying cause of the majority of all major illnesses and diseases. And so we must manage our stress. And one of the most immediate things we can do and powerful things we can do that's available to all of us is to slow down a little and pay attention a whole lot. And the benefit of doing that is, well, there's a magnitude of benefits, right? But more calm and more peace are some of the most immediate things. Instead of running around like a bat out of hell all of the time in this constant state of chaos, mindfulness practices can help us slow down, can help us find a sense of calm, find a sense of order and harmony in our inner world and outer world. And when we do those things and we manage our stress on a physiological level, we're doing things like lowering our cortisol levels. We're shifting out of this constant state of that fight or flight response that's very easily triggered in all of us. And it gives us a chance to shift back into that rest and digest mode. And this is important because the systems of our bodies really rely on us to have a regulated nervous system. If we are always in this hyper state of awareness, it really does give us things like adrenal exhaustion. It wears and tears on our internal organs. When our cortisol levels are elevated, then it elevates our risk of other serious issues. And so, really, it's not a matter of if, but when we need to get serious about managing the stress in our lives. And I think the thought of that stresses people out sometimes. So I want to really remind people, as you have, that it doesn't have to be, and it isn't meant to be an overwhelming thing. We're to take, as one of my favorite quotes from my accountant, who's a good friend for 20 some years. He said, you know how you eat an elephant, Abby? One bite at a time. And that really is just true of all these things when we're thinking about managing our stress and managing the big things in our lives. Mindfulness allows us to take life one bite at a time and to slow down so we can digest it, and really reap all the benefits of life. If we're not aware and moving with awareness, we are missing so much. We overlook someone's need for our attention. We overlook the need to nourish our bodies. We overlook so many things. And then because we're in this heightened state of anxiety, then we're overthinking things while we're missing the things that really need our attention the most. We live in these false narratives that the brain just starts to kick into high gear because we haven't slowed down and practiced that mindfulness and unpacked the stuff that ends up just being bullshit in the brain. So that's a long-winded response to the benefits are many, but the most immediate is really taking control of our health. Is a simple but profound way to look at it for me. What are your thoughts on that?
Beautifully said. All of your metaphors about bites and digestion kind of made me a little hungry. So I feel like I need a snack or something now. But beautifully said. I totally agree. I've definitely seen a lot of the mental health benefits of mindfulness in terms of helping to regulate emotions. I've definitely felt the stress relief benefits, and it's helped me manage anxiety and spells of depression associated with my PMDD. So I am totally seconding everything you have to say. I also feel like it kind of just helps you get to know yourself. And it's interesting once you start to become conscious and aware of like the different stories that you're telling yourself and the different my husband is really good at picking up on his own kind of mental loops that he gets into and kind of calling it out and being like, "Uh-oh, I'm going down this path again and I'm having the same thought." And he'll like say it out loud and like let me know, and I'm like, "Oh wow, like you caught yourself and like you're putting it out into the universe and into our relationship as well that like no, this thought is not real and like I'm going a different way and I don't have to follow this thought anymore." And it's like, goodness gracious, it's just like so much self-development is available to you by just by reconnecting with yourself and kind of letting the fog of all of these silly thoughts that come up that mean nothing. It's so funny how we give all this meaning to a thought that like literally doesn't mean anything. Like just because you thought it, like doesn't mean it's real, doesn't mean it's fact, doesn't mean it's important, doesn't mean it's validated. Like we just be thinking things and then getting upset about them. It's like, let's reel it in a bit, you know? It's just it's so interesting. You just kind of you start to really connect with what matters and with, understanding like what's made up. So I feel like the last space that we had, this was interesting. The last space that we had for the first time ever, we couldn't get through all of our speaker requests, which was really unfortunate because there were a couple people toward the end that we just could not have come up and share with us. We're really mindful of everyone's time and try to keep our space to an hour. So we close this space at 8 o'clock Eastern, which is in about 30 minutes. So, Abby, unless there's anything else particular you want to cover, I feel like maybe we start to open up to speakers so we can allow more time for discussion, and hopefully everyone who has a question or a comment or a suggestion is able to come up and request the mic. We don't have to cut anybody off this time. What do you think?
I think that's great, and I'm so excited that for the first time in this space, the Elevate account is with our newly appointed community manager. The Miss Wynn is in the house, and I'm so excited she's here. I haven't fully checked in with her to know if she's even able to come up, but I'd love to welcome her up to the floor for anything she would love to add to the conversation. And again, it's just really cool to see a room full of many familiar faces and some new ones to me as well. So just want to shout out a welcome, and would love to hear any of you add to the conversation. This what is this evening for us? I'm really enjoying this time of day so far. We'll see how we feel after, but so far so good.
So far, so good. Yeah, so I would like to invite anyone to request the mic. I see we have a request from Sophia. So let me just get you up here, my friend. Welcome. Thanks for joining us, Sophia. Appreciate you hanging out with us on our first Wednesday evening space. How you doing? Are you enjoying the combo?
Good morning. Good morning. I arrived a little late from the Breathe with Me, but the first thing I heard was someone say mindful eating. And I wondered if you had talked about mindful eating because I would love to talk about mindful eating.
We touched on it lightly, but we would love to have your input and perspective as well.
So, about 3 years ago, with Katie Den Uden, she talked about eating a raisin. So, like before you eat the raisin, you look at it from every angle and you notice like all the ripples and curves in the skin and the pits and the valleys. And you imagine what it's going to taste like and how it's going to feel in your mouth. And ever since then, like I do that, I try to do that with every meal because I don't want to just be mindlessly putting things in my mouth and scarfing down sandwiches. So I really try to appreciate the textures and the colors and where did it come from? You know, how did it get to me before it ended up on my fork or between my chopsticks? And then, take that first bite and notice how it feels in your mouth and that it's giving you energy and it's going to sustain you and how healthy it's going to make you and that type of thing. So I only have like one meal a day. And so I really plan it with colors and textures and flavors that I'm going to love. And I make it more like a spiritual thing than just a rush to put something in my mouth because I'm going to die. And I really love doing that with like my cups of coffee or a glass of wine too, like wrapping my hands around my favorite mug or teacup and feeling the warmth just come into my body as I hold it and I smell it. And those things, they just all bring me so much happiness and joy.
That's so beautiful. And I love as you're explaining this, really, it drives home the point that doing these things really improves our relationships on every level. You're improving your relationship with your own body and with food. And making it a really meaningful practice, and that's really beautiful for your nervous system. And I think those are some really amazing practices. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I love hearing that.
I pinned a story, or not pinned it, but I put it in the comments about coffee with my grandma.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think that's incredible. And I think that especially when you're only eating once a day, you have this different sense of gratitude and appreciation for the food that you're consuming. You're really looking forward to it and you're really considering it in a different way. And I think that those of us who've ever tried fasting have had similar experiences, perhaps, where when we're going to break our fast, we really put effort into that first meal to make sure it's beautiful and delicious. And, we're really anticipating it. And I think that's the way that food is meant to be enjoyed, to be honest, Sophia. So I think you're onto something. And I think in our busy Western lives, we've just kind of lost sight of the fact that we're blessed and we should be grateful to have delicious, nourishing meals to eat. And for most of us, the ability to choose any day to eat something different, um, not prepared by us, like how amazing. So beautifully said. Thanks for that reminder. We really appreciate it. I also just want to quickly say the floor is open. If anyone would like to request the mic, you are more than welcome to come up and join the conversation. This is a safe space. There's absolutely no pressure and there's absolutely no judgment. Sometimes feelings come up. It's okay to laugh here, cry here. The whole spectrum of human emotion is welcome in Mindful Business Twitter spaces.
100%. As I was listening to you speak, Sophia, I was thinking about how we often do those things at like retreats. That's exactly the kind of thing I would plan at a retreat, but why aren't we doing more of that on a daily basis, or even once a week? I think I get more into like really putting intention and effort into the meal I cook for my family on the weekends. It's grown into, especially in the last couple of years. And so I love the gentle reminder. That's why I love having these spaces where we can share with each other. We all, even if we have mindfulness practices in place, say that quickly 3 times, we can get in a rut, and then it's no longer that mindful if it starts to become super routine and habit. So I love these little gentle reminders of new ways to approach a different way of being mindful. And I think our brains welcome this, right? Our nervous system welcomes this. And as you said, it brings you so much joy and happiness. And it really is in the most simple pleasures that we find the real moments of life. And if we aren't living in awareness, those are the things we miss. We just gloss right over them. Because we're caught in this loop of whatever it might be, anxiety, frustration, grief, a mixture of those things. We want to feel our feelings, but mindfulness practices help us recognize, oh, those are feelings, those are impulses. Those don't have to be me. I am not those things. I may feel those things, but I'm not those things. So just really enjoying the conversation tonight and feeling really inspired to incorporate some more. I feel like I do some mindful eating, but not to the level that you talked about, Sophia. So I feel really inspired by what you shared.
I do the same with like my chores too. I like doing the dishes because I can't hear anything over the water and such, and it really makes me pay attention and be grateful for all the things I have. You know, if I'm sweeping the floor or if I'm folding my socks, I need to be grateful that I have dozens of pairs of socks. And then I kind of rethink too, do I need dozens of pairs of socks? But I try to incorporate that into chores because those are things that people typically don't like doing, you know, they're chores, gross. But if we take the time to appreciate the fact that we're able to do them, that we have a broom and a floor to sweep and things like that, I really just think it helps keep us grounded, and showing gratitude makes us feel so good too. So I just try to put it into everything that I do.
We had talked a little before you came in, it must have been about something like that, doing the dishes, and how it all really starts as a practice, and then it becomes a habit, and then it becomes a lifestyle where you can really imbue this sense of mindfulness into all the things that you're doing. But it takes, patience and practice and persistence. And I think it's a beautiful way to be. And by doing so, in exchange, you get this state of calm, right, in your life and in your environment. So I love hearing all of these things. And I want to welcome the Miss Win behind Elevate Account tonight up to the floor. How are you, my soul sister? Good to see you.
Hi, ladies. I am absolutely loving this conversation, especially because I'm proud to say that I was doing some of that already. And there's not sometimes there's not a ton of opportunities to give yourself a pat on the back when you're stressed out. So I'm going to give myself a pat on the back because it sounds like I'm doing all right in the mindful. Um, in the mindful lane, and I definitely took a few tips from y'all that I can use to be even more so. I love that I can be in Web3 and feel like I'm a kind person and then have these conversations that unlock pieces of my brain that allow me to be even kinder. You know, you ladies, people like Lori and Tuesday, you guys really have changed my habits in such a healthy, like, in a fulfilling way. And I, this is exactly why 10 episodes of these are so important. We're unlocking these little parts of our brain, right? I was gonna. Well, I since the mindful eating has been covered, which I would normally love to be the one to talk about. I would love to talk just briefly about mindful usage of social media, especially for degens, right? When Sophia was talking about mindfully sweeping the floor, my degen mind went to sweeping what floor? I know it's so awful, right? But this is that gives us the perfect opportunity to talk about mindful usage of social media. I spent so long being so angry, because the world is really difficult to take in if you're reading the news every day. And so, you know, surprisingly, Web3 kind of got me out of that. Instead, I started meeting people and getting really excited to talk to them each day. And then suddenly, little by little, like the doom scroll was siphoned out. And now everything I do, particularly on Twitter, is a lot more mindful, because I'm like, hey, I want to talk to them. I want to say hi. I want to say, how are you today? And rather than, oh shit, the pit of my stomach hurts. I just read about what's going on here. And again, I've said this before. I think it's important to be informed, of course. I'm not living in a bubble. It's not possible to do that. But what I got tired of was just feeling anxious and angry all day. So to be a little more mindful about it, and this is what I tell people is, listen, if you're not mad at least once a day, you're not paying attention. But if you're mad all day, then that's too much. So, like, try to find that in between where, again, you're on social media. What was its original use for? To connect with people, connect with your friend who's so far away, that you haven't seen in years, that you haven't seen since high school. Those are mindful ways of using social media, and make you really happy, right? When you connected with someone. Doom scrolling, posting political opinions. Um, these are not always the mindful things, because you're doing it in a really like high, intense state of mind, right? That isn't, and especially emotional. So I can honestly say that mindful social media usage has made such a big difference in my life. You guys see me so happy, and a big part of that reason is that, because I kind of just had to siphon it out. I'm mad at once a day, maybe a couple times a day, by checking the news, but that's it. That's all I will allow, because if I continue, especially as an empath, I won't survive. So that's my suggestions to y'all, especially, and ironically, because we're all on social media right now. But again, I think this is important. So I count it as mindful.
I'll jump in. Sorry, I was waiting to see if you wanted to go in. And Sierra, it's really, I can actually relate to what you're saying. If you if you've seen my TikTok at all, that is where I used to be as well. I really kind of ranted a lot. I built a following. People really related to that. There's like 27,000 people that really loved it when I would make fun of Marjorie Taylor Greene every day of the week. But but yes, then you start. It felt good to vent at first, but it really, if we stay there, it's then you just feel stressed out and anxious all the time. And I definitely can relate to that. I fell down that same rabbit hole, not really on Twitter, but over on TikTok, for sure. And so it's been a really lovely thing about Web3. As you said, we can all stay very well informed of what's going on. And often many of us come together to address some of the things that are going on in the world, and try to lend a hand, because we, in these spaces, because of Web3, have a more global view. At least I feel like that's been helpful to me, to stop looking through such an Americanized lens, and really look at the world in a more global way, because of the connections possible here in these, well, something I never would have anticipated. None of us would have, right? These rooms that we're in, traveling through space and time to all really be together in what feels like the same room, sharing, all these ideas together. I digress, but you know what I'm saying. Yes, Sierra, jump in.
No, absolutely. I love, well, first of all, congratulations and welcome to your new role as community manager. Woo! I'm so excited for you. That is awesome. It's truly a match made in heaven. So I'm excited to also see two little octopus PFPs right next to each other. It's perfect. I love that you mentioned using social media mindfully. I feel like it has a lot to do with the time that we spend and what we spend looking at, but also remembering to remembering to protect our energetic boundaries online. I feel like sometimes we forget, like, just because you're online doesn't mean you need to be accessible to everyone. And I feel like sometimes we need that reminder. Being on social media doesn't mean that like it's an open door for anyone to peer into your life and comment on it. And that it's really important. A part of using social media mindfully is protecting your boundaries and knowing when it's time to mute or block or delete or whatever you need to do to protect your peace and stay safe. And especially in Web3, I think being anonymous has become more acceptable, and it's really allowed people to protect their identities and personal information in new ways, which is important. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's definitely an aspect of mindfulness that I hadn't really thought too much about just yet. And something else that just randomly popped into my head was paying homage to some of like the mindful gurus and leaders. And like, I'm curious, Abby, like there are a few that stick out in my head in terms of like, I don't want to say spiritual teachers, but maybe authors or TED talk givers, whatever, just different people that stand out that have put together either books or material or lectures that really kind of unlock something in my brain in terms of better understanding mindfulness and why it's important. And I'm curious if like there's anyone who stands out for you particularly.
Gosh, I have had a lot of wonderful teachers and mentors in my life. Some would be local to my area, like Suda Wexler was where I took my original 200-hour teacher training at the Chicago Yoga Center. He closed after the COVID, after 35 years in Chicago, but that he himself and several teachers who came through that studio, Manju Joyce being one of them. I have had the opportunity to train 50 hours with him, and that was really, he's who introduced mantra, like beautiful Sanskrit mantra in 2008, and helped me establish a mantra practice. And so he was really instrumental, and I feel really lucky to have been able to train and study with him. Another teacher named Jeff Masters. In terms of more accessible things like that you might be able to get in books or Audible, there's a uh, there's a book. My brain is not going to think of it right at the moment. Oh, it's something referring to neurosculpting. It's more recent that I've come across, but for people that have don't feel inclined to things that are tied to maybe yoga lineage or traditions, the book about neurosculpting, and I'll find the link and share it in a little bit here. It really talks about the science behind these practices, and it really helps explain mindfulness on a very practical level, and it really has some nice exercises that demystify the approach and really explains the neuroscience behind the brain and how we have neuroplasticity, which means that our habits and our thoughts and all that negative thinking, all those things can be changed, and we can shape new habits and form new habits with practice. And it's a different approach, and really says that even though there's valid, of course, and value in all the many different traditions out there, the science behind it really doesn't matter which practice. It really is a matter of doing something that brings you to the present moment. That could be any number of breathing exercises, and yes, it could be a very special traditional one, but it could also be just as simple as the box breathing, right? The 4 count box breathing. It's just doing it that shapes the brain. Science shows us. So neurosculpting is the name of it. That's a more probably accessible tool than some of the teachers I've mentioned. So yeah, and of course Brene Brown, I feel like, has a lot of accessible information on mindful living, mindfulness, being present, and all the things that go along with that. Big, huge fan there. And I could probably keep going, but I'm going to pass the mic and see who you have, because I'm sure you have a great list as well.
Oh my goodness, I've never heard of this book. So I just looked it up. And for anyone who wants to find it, it's called Neurosculpting, a Whole Brain Approach to Heal Trauma, Rewrite Limiting Beliefs, and Find Wholeness. And it's by an author. named Lisa Wimberger, and it looks like it's on Amazon. So that means it's probably at the local bookstore as well. So this is really cool. I'm going to look into this book and probably pick it up. I hadn't heard of this just yet. Definitely familiar with Brene Brown. She is amazing. I think some of her books are on Oprah's list and have been widely circulated. So I'm sure some of y'all have seen those. For me, I guess what really kind of unlocked something in my brain was discovering Dr. David Hawkins, who is a psychiatrist who wrote a series of, I don't know if you would call them spiritual, I guess like spiritual self help books. And he particularly has a book called Letting Go. I will say, because he's a psychiatrist and very medically trained, the books are kind of dense. So it's not a quick read by any means, but the book essentially details the whole process that we go through of having an emotion come up, allowing yourself to feel it, learning not to like judge it or resist it or try to change it, learning how to just like kind of experience that feeling of resistance and not resist the resistance, if that makes sense. um, Feel the feeling and then let it go. And it's so interesting. Like, the name of the book is called Letting Go, and that's exactly what it's about. And the entire book is just kind of going through how you go through that process, which sounds simple, but obviously all of us know isn't. And another one that really kind of changed things for me is a book called The Power of Now, um, which is by an author called Eckhart Tolle, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. It's like another spiritual kind of self help book. It's basically a book that describes enlightenment as kind of rising above your thoughts, and really outlines like how our ego influences our thoughts and different techniques that we can use to focus on the now and be more present. He really talks extensively about something he calls the pain body, which is essentially this kind of like emotional layer within all of us, where it's like the trauma layer, that like when someone pokes us and something gets triggered, like that's what's coming up. He calls it our pain body. And he talks about all the different things that trigger it and contribute to it. So those two books in particular, when I first started my mindfulness journey, really just like, I'm a very kind of practical and logical and rational person, and like reading articles and books kind of helps me digest and unpack things. And considering that, these were helpful resources for me. So thank you for asking, my dear. That being said, I feel like I've been on my soapbox for quite a few minutes now. We are approaching our final minutes of our Twitter space, our like 5 minute countdown. I want to just remind everyone the floor is open. I'm happy to take any like last minute questions or comments. Otherwise, I'll pass it back over to Abby, and I'm happy to see what thoughts my rambling just sparked for you.
I had forgotten about Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now, and also A New Earth. I enjoyed immensely, and similarly, it was all really helpful and well done, and something I feel like I referred to for a long time, and then it faded to the background. So I'm glad you mentioned that. It actually sparked another book. I know we're in our final moments, but the Celestine Insights, the Celestine Prophecies. Actually, I read when I was, I don't know, probably 21, and I'm 46. And I didn't like the way James Redfield, I think is the name of the author. I don't particularly like his writing style, so it took me a minute to get through. And it is fiction, but it really turned me on to looking at things through a different lens. So I like to put that on the list of things for people to go rabbit holing. One last mention of that, neurosculpting. I do recommend the Audible for it, because she leads you through some of the meditations, and it's really nice to hear them. But I'm sure the printed book would be a good resource to have to go along with it as well. But yeah, no, I've really enjoyed this conversation and love the energy of so many wonderful people here in this space with us. And of course, always feel energized after sharing and exchanging in this space with you, Sierra, my friend, a mindful business partner. I love this so much and really got a lot out of this conversation. And thank you so much, the Miss Win, my right tentacle, for being here. And yeah, I've just really enjoyed this and can't wait for next week.
Of course, I'm super excited for it as well. Two things quickly. One, I saw Alaska Queen just replied. So for anyone who's like new to Twitter Spaces or hasn't used it in a while, or this is their first time using it, there's like this little icon at the bottom right. It's like a little purple message icon, and hopefully you have the latest version. You can see it if you're on Twitter Spaces, and there's like the number 2 next to it. And if you click it, it's like the main Twitter Spaces post, and like people can reply and chat here. And it looks like Alaska Queen replied like a minute or so ago, showing that she's also reading A New Earth. So like we are so synced up and aligned and all vibrating on the same wavelength right now. So I think that's amazing. And I just want to quickly welcome up Dara to the stage and say hello. Thanks for hanging out with us this evening.
Hi, thank you so much. I was just going to mention A New Earth, and that's why I was coming up to the stage, but I went through some pretty significant trauma many years ago, and it was literally that book that I feel saved my life. Um, I was able to really learn how to remove myself from the emotions that I was feeling and see myself as, from the outside. So one beautiful thing that came out of that experience was, I would take my son. At the time he was maybe 3 or 4, and we would go to a local park, and we would get lost in the woods, and we would sit there on the ground. And I just remember how beautiful it was, because we would literally like listen for the wind through the trees. We would listen for every little sound in the park, the birds chirping. So that was just such a beautiful experience. And I found, you know, whenever I need to kind of get regrounded, I always go back to that book. So if anybody hasn't read it or hasn't listened to it, I definitely would recommend it. It totally changed my life. And so, yeah, I just wanted to second that recommendation.
Thank you so, so much. That is 4 votes right now in this single Twitter space for A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose. This book is, I believe it's over 10 years old. And I believe the author of the book also did a webinar with Oprah Winfrey to kind of accompany the book, where he did an in-depth interview or series of interviews with her that I'm sure have been watched millions of times, where he answers tons of questions related to the book. So I would urge you, if you're not a book person and you don't want to read the book, maybe get on YouTube and find some of his interviews with Oprah. Hey, Sophia, what's going on?
I wanted to recommend another book. It's called Simple Abundance by Sarah Brecknock Bannon. About 96, 97, I also saw her on Oprah, and she just gave off so much love and energy that even though I was making like $4 an hour, I immediately bought her hardcover book and got copies for all the women in my family. And I like to have something to just think about every day, reading through her daily thoughts and meditations. And they're written out from like January 1 until December 31st. I have something to read and reflect on, and maybe a little homework to do. But you don't have to do them in order. I have thought of her book over the last 25, almost 30 years, over and over again. And I just like pick it up again and start on whatever day I'm at. And I feel like it's always got something to tell me.
Oh my goodness, we might need to have a book club. Is this our sign to start a book club?
Oh, well, there's already one. Erin has one with the Web3 book club, and I'm inviting you to her space. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, but check out Erin, the Decentralized Land Space. And I don't know if I said the name of the book is Simple Abundance.
Simple abundance. Nice. Of course. Thank you for sharing that. I had no idea. I would love to check out this book club. And I love reading and I love connecting with people and bonding over kind of sharing experiences and thoughts and reflections over reading. So thank you. Thank you to everyone who shared all their awesome book recommendations. We are now officially at our 1 hour of our Twitter space. This has been such an amazing conversation. This month is going to be an amazing month. Closer to Halloween, we're transforming our weekly Twitter space into a Halloween party. And perhaps there will be an NFT prize for the best Halloween costume. So if anyone, even if you don't have Halloween plans, if you've been like waiting to break out a costume, here's your excuse. It's time. It's time to bring the costumes out. So I'm excited for that. We have changed the time of our spaces, as I mentioned at the beginning. We're now Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. And yeah, stay tuned. We'll share the link for our next space soon. I'm now going to close it. I appreciate everyone's time and energy. If you joined late, we do record and upload these to YouTube so you can listen back at any point. I hope everyone has a lovely evening. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your love and your patience. And I'll see you soon.